try to escape from the concept of God, they try to put it as a rational argument. But it's really not about rationality, it's really about a moral bias. Let's say you go to a restaurant and you order your favorite food, you eat it, and then you refuse to pay. Your argument is that you're not sure whether the owner of the restaurant is still alive. You demand that that owner should either come in person to talk to you or call you, and some documents of his existence should be shown to you. Otherwise, he won't pay the bill. This is exactly what atheism is like. You consume all the benefits and facilities that have been provided to you by God, and then you refuse to be grateful to Him, because that would mean you would have to morally restrain yourself, you have to be more humble, and all of these moral implications might be a little too burdensome for you, and therefore you want to escape it. What really comes between the man and the truth? It's either his ego or his desires. These are the two things that stand in the way of a man trying to seek truth. And therefore, this is exactly why humans have failed to live with the words of God. Every time a messenger came and with the message of God, they corrupted those messages as soon as they could to accommodate the morality for their ego and for their desires. Ego by making themselves superior and more deserving of the heaven than they actually are, and desires by accommodating, by defining morality in a way that it accommodates for their desires. And this treachery, this deception, this covering up of truth is really the worst thing a man can do. Because if you can really cover up the morality itself, then you can do any sin as soon as society accepts it. The fact that God has not appeared to us so far, first of all, it means that we are not able to, probably are not capable to see Him in this form in which we are. Or it would also mean that He really doesn't want to show Himself. Because if He did, even the most dishonest and most corrupt people would eventually have to accept the truth if He appears, because of His infinite power. We'll inevitably have to bow down if He actually appears and we really feel and look at Him. Even if a normal, powerful person comes and walks by us, we tend to have an influence of Him. Imagine if the King of the Kings, if the Master of the universe appeared in whatever form or shape He exists, or even if He exists beyond shape and form, the fear and the power and the influence would be so great that no one would be able to deny anything. No one would be able to, deviate. So, and this actually reinforces the fact that God has created this life as a test. And if you're saying that science should have discovered God by now, you're actually saying that God's design of tests should have failed by now, because God could not have seen through the entire process. He could not have thought through this, that humans would discover a lot of things. They would discover scientific method. They would discover a lot of the details of the universe. And they would discover some of the workings of the universe, and therefore eventually they would find me. And so He could not think of that, and therefore He should have appeared by now. This is not the case. God knows the plan. Every single discovery that the humans make, every single increment in human knowledge is not without the leave of God. Another argument people try to give to avoid the God-sent morality is to try to prove that God is not good. And they say that God is either not good, not all good, or God is not all powerful, because there are bad things happening in this world. As a matter of fact, this is true conditionally. That God is either not all good or God is either not all powerful if there is no afterlife. This means that any reasonable God that makes any sense at all will have to come with accountability, with justice, with afterlife. So because we see that a lot of people have to live this life under injustice, under brutality, and some people die in that condition, and some of the people who are doing the wrong things live their life in riches and die in that condition. So we don't see ultimate justice happening here. So God is either not all good or God is not all powerful unless there's an afterlife. But if there's an afterlife and it is so significant that the injustices in this life are negligible in front of that, in that case, God is all good and all powerful. And this life is only temporary, a very, very temporary simulation, a test to define our ultimate future. Finally, people try to explain how the universe created, and therefore they think that the complexity is justified. However, there's a night and day difference between explanation and justification. Let's say I have this ball and I throw this ball somewhere, and it eventually results in the building across the road to fall off. And something very rare might have happened. This might hit a brick, which might hit a bigger brick, and that might hit a pillar, which might fall, and then it might result in a small building falling, or part of a building falling, and the whole building falling. This is a very, very, very rare coincidence that in whatever direction I throw this ball, a building across the road would fall. But if that happens, we can have a scientific explanation of how exactly that happened, how rare it was, and yet it happened. But that explanation does not justify the falling of the building with the ball. So a very rare coincidence can be explained by scientific explanations, but explanation is not a plausible justification. And this is a situation which I call explanationism. And the modern atheistic narrative, the dominant narrative, is actually a victim of this state of mind where you're trying to explain something that is extremely rare or impossible, and you are being satisfied by those explanations as if they justified the reality.